At this point, a lot of Tesla Model S and X owners face this dilemma with the scroll wheels breaking, and any sort of YouTube search, it seems as if the only recourse and the only solution is replacement of the whole unit, because it doesn't seem like the scroll wheels are sold individually. So it seems like you have to replace this whole switch gear unit, which seems kind of fucked up. Oops, I'm sorry. Pardon the French. Seems kind of messed up because, oh my god, look at that. It actually recorded what I said. Oh my god, so embarrassing. It's going to Tesla now. Sorry. Cancel. Okay. Why is the air on? Okay. So, getting back to what I was saying, it seems kind of wasteful because you have the switches, 3 other switches that are good, just because this scroll wheel, I can't pronounce anything, goes bad. And when I take it apart, you'll see exactly why it goes bad. But this wasn't my first rodeo. Yes, this one broke on me a few months ago. And it seemed, again, very wasteful just to buy the whole assembly. So I decided, glutton for punishment that I am, that I'll try to endeavor to fix it. Because what do you have to lose? Besides some time and a little bit of sanity, depending on how mechanically inclined you are. I would say on a scale of 1 to 10, in terms of difficulty, I would rate it about a 5. Not too bad. There's only one part that's very difficult, but otherwise it's manageable. So, basically all these, you won't need too many tools, with the exception of a small drill press or something to drive or guide very straight holes, and you'll see later why. But tools you'll need is basically a star. What is this? A ratcheting star point socket set. And you will need the T27 size. And pick this one up during the first time, and it worked fine. But I found my other one, so I decided to use this one. So it's pretty simple. The first thing you do is you got to remove the whole airbag assembly that includes the switchgear. And it's basically just 2 screws in the back. And those are the T27 size. One here and one on the other side. And yeah, so let me take care of that first. So basically, once you get those 2 screws out, to pry off the airbag assembly, you have to use a pry tool or your fingers, depending how thin and strong they are, and pull this out. I already pulled it out, so it's easier now. But once you get it out, the whole assembly pops out. Oh, music, lovely. Let's pause. Okay, and you'll see some wiring plugs that need to be unplugged. Let's see, I think there are 3. 1, 2, 3. And I'll take care of that right now. Well, I finally got it off, and it looks like automotive plugs, they always have some sort of lock. So this way it doesn't jar loose. This one, the locks are on this side and this side on the edges. So you gotta pinch these things in by itself, both at the same time. This one, same deal, it's on the edges. So you gotta pinch that in, both at the same time. The last one was different. Let's take a look. The last one, this little hook here. Now that is removed, you can see the channel in which this wire goes back in when you replace it. There's also a guide when you reinstall it, make sure it aligns. And these are the anchor points, and it's basically like a press fit. And there's a few scattered throughout. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Sorry about that. And then you will have the loose assembly. Yes. And I'll begin to take this apart. Okay, now that we have the assembly apart, we can see the switch gear. And first thing you got to do is remove the clips, of course, and this clip took me a minute to figure out, but you have to push in on this place over here. Once you push it in, it pulls right out. And then you have another plug, which I haven't even looked at yet. But in the meantime, you can see these are the guides, not guides, but it's sort of where the rubber press fit, securing whatever is, and I think there are about 8 of them throughout, and it goes into the rubber grommets on the steering wheel. So it's important when you're reinstalling to get those things properly aligned. And let me remove the sucker. I think I can see where you need to push to unlock the plug. And I think it's right here. Well, that took a minute to get this guy out. Let me show you on the other side. It's basically 2 small Phillips head. There's one here and one here. Remove those suckers, and there's no need to really take the whole airbag assembly apart. You can, if you're very patient and have finesse and not a heavy hand, you can remove this unit without taking this assembly further apart, which will save a lot of time and aggravation. But again, don't muscle it out. You have to finesse it out, kind of like a puzzle. And there are basically guides here, use here, and here when you're putting it back in. So it's those 2 guides and these 2 screw holes that holds it together. Now that we have the piece apart, this is what people have been replacing, the entire assembly. And there's already 1, 2, 3 micro switches in there, including the scroll wheel. So there's 4 switches that need to be, unfortunately, thrown out because one of the scroll wheel failed. But the scroll wheel switching apparatus is still good. It's just the physical wheel itself that broke. And this is where it gets a little tricky because we have to take this apart. And there are tabs here, and I can't really see in this video, here. You have to use like a little screwdriver, prime out from inside along the perimeter. And once you get that out, there's a couple of ribbon, what is it called? Like data ribbons that you need to kind of unhook and pull out. And I'll show you that in a minute. And the first step to taking this apart is to pop out the rear cover. And I already popped it out because it's kind of a pain in the butt. It requires 2 hands. And you can see the anchors here. 1, 2, 3, 4. So it basically latches in pretty tightly. Okay, next step. Next step involves pulling out the circuit board pretty lightly, and it looks like everything pops out. The scroll wheel is still left in there, but you can see the ribbon cables back here. It's hard to tell, but I think there are 2, but let me check. Well, good thing it turns out it's only one ribbon cable that needs to be pulled out. So you gotta be very careful pulling this out and making sure you don't damage it. There is a locking lever on these things, very small plastic, so it requires very little force. And here's that scroll wheel. Okay, let's take it out. And the problem is, let's look at this design. On one end, this end here, it's very thick, and you can see it's pretty pronounced. But on the other, it is super thin, and it breaks flush. So this is actually snapped. It's hard to see here, but it usually breaks, well, it always breaks from the thin side. And the problem with the thin side is that it's sort of hexagonal, and it slips into this rotating switch. I'm pretty sure the little piece is still in there. All right, so let me get that little piece out. And this rotating switch has a hex shape to it to engage it. All right, let me get that little piece out. Okay, now I've got that little piece out, and you can see the comparison. The axle, I guess you would call it, it's made of plastic. And on one side it's super thick, as you can see here. But on the other, it is super thin. And this little speck here is what breaks off. It's amazing how thin it is. So it's a matter of time. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when your scroll wheel will break. And the tragedy is just this little plastic piece requires replacement of the whole assembly. So of course I racked my brain thinking, how can I fix this? As you can see, it breaks off pretty flush, and this is hexagonal. So I was looking and thinking maybe I can use hex bits or Allen wrench, try to find something small. But of course, as you know, fate or Murphy's Law would have it, it's in between sizes. So here's the hard part, is that you have to find a hex key set that is one size bigger and file it down using a Dremel. So let me show you what I did last time. Okay, the last time I just went to Harbor Freight basically and bought myself a bit set, different types of heads, hex bits, star bits, Phillips, all sorts of stuff. It was only like, must have been under $5, and I figured I'd use a sacrificial bit, which turns out that little nub lies right between 1.5 and 2 millimeters. So I sacrificed a 2 millimeter bit to make the new axle. So I'll take the 1.5 as an example. If I can see it, there it goes. So it basically goes into this rotating switch. Oh, I can't do this with holding camera. But this one's too small, so it rotates freely. And of course the 2 millimeter, which was over here, is too big. So I had to use a Dremel and file down all 6 sides very carefully. And that's the hardest part of this. There's 2 hard parts. This is one of them. And I rethought my approach, and instead of sacrificing a whole bit and missing the 2, I thought it'd be wiser to use Allen wrenches in the same size, because I can cut down an Allen wrench and it'd still be good. I could still use the rest of it. But here, not as much. I lost that bit. and then, you know, it's a good tool set. But if you miss that one bit that you need, you're screwed. So I think the Allen wrench approach is better, because you'll just have a shorter Allen wrench. And at the 2mm size, it doesn't need to be torqued down too heavy, so the shortening of it is fine. So for the sacrificial part, again, Harbor Freight, your one-stop connection for cheap sacrificial tools. And already pulled out the 2 pieces. Did use Allen wrench because this isn't an Allen wrench. This is a hex key set. Yes. So I guess I should take this apart, shouldn't I? Guess at this point we can examine some of the parts. These are the LED lights. This is the main rotating switch, and the wheel. At end sits here. Let's turn this towards the light. Yes, that end sits here and is supported pretty well. Thin end, of course, goes inside, gets slipped in the rotating switch, and is supported that way. So in reinstalling it, you sort of gotta like nose it in and then seat the back part. And here we can see the hexagonal switch. And this is where the difficulty lies, and I had to rack my brain to figure it out. The only thing that comes close is the 2mm, but of course the 2mm is too big. That's what she said. And the 1.5, too small. Rotating it doesn't rotate the switch at all. So now the point is to basically cut down the 2mm to, no, we don't cut it down yet. We have to Dremel it and file down 6 sides to see when it will fit. And this is a very finesse part. You have to carefully file down each side, being very aware not to remove too much, because then you're screwed, and then you'll have to start all over again. Okay, let's do that. And of course, I already caught my first mistake before I said reinstall it later with the new rod installed. You had to nose it in. I'm wrong. You actually have to align it, seat it, get it aligned, and then press the rod from this side in. And it's just a tight press fit. There's no need for glue or anything, and it should be pretty permanent. Okay, now on to taking care of this piece. We're only going to end up using, let's see, probably about this much, like just the tip. And we're going to drill into here enough. It's just, I always just eyeball it and it seems to work fine. But it's going to be about this much or less. We'll see. Just enough so that enough of the rod goes into the whole wheel assembly for support, and it doesn't need to stick out too far beyond here. I guess if you can do it flush, then that's fine. But yeah, we'll have to drill the scroll wheel, And that's where this drill press comes in, from Harbor Freight again. The mecca of cheap tools. Have a drill bit set up, and I'm not sure what size it is. Don't remember. Let's see. What size is this? Can't see. 564. Yeah, it's a 564 bit. And the reason why this drill press works so well is because this hole pretty much holds this wheel perfectly. And all you have to do is support it a little from the bottom. Let the tool do the work, because you're drilling plastic. So the tool essentially just drills right through. And you just need to hold it straight, because it does go through, but it's a perfect fit. So you can just hold it while you drill. Yeah, and we'll do that later. Let me take care of the hex bit first. Oh, and the good thing is, I'm starting to discover this time, I don't think I need to remove the ribbon at all. But if anything changes as I come along, I will definitely record it and let you know. Okay, so I made a mark with a Sharpie approximating how much I will need. Again, I'm just eyeballing it, nothing too precise or exact. Just as long as it has enough length to get through the switch, the rotating switch itself, and enough, just a little enough for support on the wheel, because you don't really need to drill too far into it to hold on to it. Okay, now this is the harder part. With the vise holding this bit steady, I'm going to basically use the Dremel and wear down each of the 6 sides slowly. Don't need to do it very evenly, in the sense that it doesn't need to be flat, but I'm going to approach it tapered slightly. Like, I'm going to exaggerate and taper it like this on each side. This way it forms kind of like a wedge when it gets stuck into the switch. And it essentially gets pushed in like a wedge, but a very small wedge. And if you can do it pretty straight, that's okay, but I prefer to angle it slightly, so this way it's a tighter fit in the scroll wheel as well. Like the larger end will get shoved into the scroll wheel. Well, as I was approaching the grind, it seemed it's easier to secure the Dremel and use my hand to keep it straight on each surface. So this is the most, I guess, difficult part of this process. So I'll do one edge at a time, slowly but surely, see how it fits. I can't record it though, because I only have 2 hands and no tripod and no clamp. Turns out the easier way is for me to hold this flat and freehand this, because it's really hard to see the flat side and get it right on all 6 sides. So I just had to hold it with my other hand, use the light, score on the flat sides on each of the 6 sides, but I'm almost there. Okay, now after scoring all 6 sides very carefully a few times, it finally works. Got it through. And as you can see, it sticks out a little bit, but hopefully when I press fit it back in, it'll be flush. And I'll cut it right on the score mark, a little towards the right of the marker mark. And this should give me enough space. So the front end is a little bit more tapered, so it was able to stick in pretty easily. We have it in reverse right now. As we reinstall it later, it's going to be put in this way from reverse. Or actually, no. That will be interesting. So we'll stick it in here and put it in the wheel. Hopefully it works. We'll see. So now we have a cutting disc installed on the Dremel, and I'm just going to cut right behind that line and make it 90 degrees and as clean as possible, and this way the tool will not, it will salvage the tool and I can still use it for other things. Okay, the cut, excuse me, oh my god, choking. Yes, the cut is done, and try to get it pretty clean. It's super sharp. It's like knife sharp right now, so I'm going to probably go over it with a hand file or some sandpaper. But here is the rod, hex rod, and coincidentally, this tells you how much I clean up my workbench. I found the original hex bit from the previous project of the left scroll wheel. This was a sacrificial bit, and I must say it was a little easier doing it this way, because doing it this way it was very hard to see the flat edges while grinding down, and that was very difficult. Not impossible, but very difficult. Now this makes it easier because these large flat surfaces correspond to the flat surfaces on the tip, so it made grinding it a little easier. But only tragedy is that because it's easy, I lose a 2mm now, so it's gone. Whereas this, I still have the tool. I can still use this. It's not lost. So that's the pros and cons. I would recommend, if you feel really daring, do it this way. Okay, that was a real pain in the ass. After a while, I had to taper down the taper itself because of the way it's going to be installed. And trust me, grinding it, this little nub will fly, and it flew about 3 times. Luckily, I was able to find it in this mess, and that worked out. All right, let me show you how it's installed. Okay, now I filed down this tool a little bit because this was super sharp and it would impale you, so you have to file it down, dull it. Very important because it will pierce you. Okay, so here's the finished part. Tapered end is on this side, smaller end is on that side. It's very negligible, and it should be that way. Now, one thing I completely forgot, of course, is how to install it, so I had to figure it out again. It seems like the only way to install it is to have the wheel in there first. And then, once the wheel is in there, set in place with the hole drilled, is that you take the piece and you pin it in. So you actually slip in the tapered side through the hole here. Let's see if I can do this. Oh, okay. And sort of just pin it in, and it'll go through the hole that I'm going to drill on this side. And then, because it's a little wider, you can press it just a little bit in so it gets super tight. Apologize, this thing's not focusing, but this gives you an idea of how deep to drill the hole, and I'll mark my drill bit to account for a little bit of excess here pushed through. And let me drill. Okay, so I pushed it through, and it's relatively flush now. Relatively. It doesn't need to be any more than that. So on this end, I can see how much I need to drill. And it's better to drill a little deeper than too shallow, but it should give enough support once it's in there to really be held well. And at this part, stage of the game, I will drill and be right back. Okay, now we're up to the second hardest part, which is drilling the hole in the scroll wheel on the drill press. I wrapped the scroll wheel with a couple of loops of electrical tape just to give it a little bit more width because it was falling through here a little too much, and I wanted a little bit more support. So now the trick is to get this pretty straight and bring the platform up to the drill bit, line it up as good as I can get with the eyeball, and drill. I did mark the depth to just a hair more than that. And yeah, we'll see how it goes. Okay, now I brought the platform up as close to the drill bit as I can. I used a Sharpie to mark right there for depth. And with this bit, it should be just perfect for that hex bit that I just completed. It should press fit, so hopefully it will turn out okay. Wish me luck. Okay, and just finished drilling, and we will see whether or not this turns out good. It was kind of tough though. I had to go very slow, but the tool does all the work for you because it's made of plastic. I just stuck it in just to check the depth, make sure that everything's cool. We could see how deep it was. Finally got the camera to stand by itself, which is pretty damn good. Okay, so what's going to happen is when we put the scroll wheel in, it's such a tight fit that once you place the scroll wheel back in and you put it right into place, you have no other choice but to take the smaller end. See if it's a smaller. It's hard to tell which one's the smaller end, but the smaller end fits in easy. There it goes. And you align the hole. You align it with the hole and you sort of pin it in. And once it's pinned in, you can sort of press it close to flush. Doesn't need to be completely flush. But as you can see, the metal has more than enough length to make it strong, and it's really tight. So you sort of got to carefully guide it in and start it by tapping it in with very lightly with the hammer. Make sure it follows the hole, but it's very tight, so a press fit's good enough for it to be permanent. My left scroll wheel was fixed about maybe 3-4 months ago, and it's held up pretty great. And this should be a relatively permanent fix, but again, the hard part is making this to replace, where is that little piece right here, this little nub of a piece. It's unreal. My goodness, it's so small it won't even focus. So you replace this little nub, oops, with steel. Yes, there's no substitute. So this length of steel will run into the scroll wheel, be self-supporting with the press fit, and be 1 billion times stronger than this little piece of nub. Looks like a rat turd. All right. Alright, turns out that the hole is a little too tight for comfort. I don't want to press it too hard because it's only getting larger as we push it in. And I tapped it in and it seemed to be a little too tight. Again, you don't want it to be too loose either because the hexagonal shape should be tight enough to turn the rotating switch. So I just wanted to open it just slightly and also double check my depth. So I slip it in here, carefully turn it on. just wanted to make sure it was deep enough so this way when we finally press it in, there's enough depth. But this looks pretty good, and it's pretty tight. Again, if you forget which way is tapered and which is not, you use this as a guide. That was too fat, so this part. Okay, so when we install it, we'll install it this way. Okay, let's see if focus, if we can do this in one take. It's a little tricky with that ribbon still there, but I'm just going to be careful not to disturb the ribbon. Otherwise, there'll be another thing on the list of things that need to get done. Okay, so far so good. It's in, and we have to gently press it. It's already working. Now, I have a pair of channel lock pliers that I can just push gently, and hopefully it'll do the trick. Since one end is metal and the other is plastic, it might be wise to wrap one side of the pliers for the plastic side. This will give me an idea how to approach it. Right. So let's quickly wrap this sucker. Because the last thing I want to do is damage the plastic. Oops. It's almost there. Oh yeah. Sweet. Okay. And looks pretty good. Scroll wheel works. And I think we're ready to reassemble it. I just need to inspect the ribbon cable to make sure that everything is good, seated properly, so this way we don't have to take everything apart again later if that ribbon cable is not seated. Okay, here we can see the micro switches. The scroll wheel is oriented this way, so on top we have one micro switch. I believe that's for the microphone. And on the bottom we can see the other micro switch. And underneath here, the scroll wheel is switch. When you push the scroll wheel down, it's not the wheel itself, but this whole plastic assembly that pushes down in the button. Pushes on a button right there. See the button? Yeah. Okay, let me reassemble this finally and see how it looks. Okay, this is kind of tricky to get in because there are these three, 1, 2, 3 tracks that the scroll wheel plastic backing needs to align with to slip it in, to align it into this housing. And it's very tricky. It's taking me a minute right now, and just very concerned about that ribbon underneath it moving about. But I'll keep at it. And again, this is a finesse job. No force. Just gotta sort of wiggle it in slightly. It should just slip right in. Wow, that took some doing to align it. You would think that it would be simple enough to get 3 prongs in the 3 tracks, but it was very difficult. I had to use this to get underneath it, to shift it left and right in whatever direction with that ribbon cable dangling. But finally it's in place, and once it's in place, hold on to it, and this way you can put this back in, and it basically just snaps in. Make sure that the notches are aligned. There are 2 here, 1, 2, and 1 here. Yes. All right. Feels tight, good as new. The alignment, the tolerances are amazing. There's no wiggle room. It doesn't move. Button works. Top button, bottom button, wheel button. They all work. So let me put this back into the steering airbag assembly. And yes, almost there. Yes, okay, so I was able to get the scroll wheel switch assembly back into the whole horn airbag housing. 1 Phillips head screwdriver here, 1 Phillips head screwdriver here. There are guide plastic rod here and here, and to give you a sense of the direction it's going. So it's a really tight fit, and again, don't force it. It can fit without removing the brackets, but don't force it. Make sure the wires aren't pinched. Route it back underneath the plate here, so it goes underneath here, under. Make sure it clicks back in, and once this thing is aligned, there's a guide rod here and a guide rod over on this side right here, and it pretty much aligns it. Okay, pretty good. Buttons still good. It's all aligned, nice and tight. This side was done a few months ago, still holding up fine. Buttons work. Nothing is loose, everything is just like new. Okay, we're back in the car on the steering wheel side, and what we need to do is align the plastic nubs with these rubber, I guess, receptacles, or there are about 8 of them, I believe, and you need to evenly push them all in, and once it's all in and aligned, then you could fasten the captive screws. But of course, before we do that, we need to snap in the wiring harness, make sure that everything is aligned better, because it looks like there's place for this wire to live so it doesn't get pinched. There's like a little wire channel back here. Yes. Okay. Now the wiring was placed back in, plugged, and put the steering. Oh, can't talk. I'm so tired now. What time is it? It is 7:44 a.m. I started this at around 4:30, 5 o'clock a.m. Took a small break to make some chili, and I'm back at it. But yes, airbag assembly fits in properly. I sort of nosed it in, the top part first. I knew there was 2 push points here, here, 2 more down here, and down here. Important thing when you're pushing it back in, do not push on this part. First time I did it, I made the mistake of pushing it here, and it does not work. It kind of screws things up with your horn and everything. You want to nose it in evenly, push it on both sides with both hands at the same time, and then again simultaneously both sides here. You'll like feel it snap in because it's in a rubber base. You feel it snap in at the same time. Then last one, bottom. And once you get those in, you're good. Then you just have to reaffix the hex screws back here, one on each side. We're good to go. But in the meantime, let's test it out. This one works, of course. Now, let's see. Yes, I have it controlling fan speed. Yes. Bottom. Top. Microphone. Nope. Yes, we are all good. Good as new. I think I only spent maybe close to 20 bucks in materials, maybe. Well, not including the tools. It's assume that you already have the tools. But otherwise, yes, job well done.